every decision you make in a race, you could put under the title of, am I looking to gain seconds and give up minutes? It's how you finish. It's about what you have in the tank. Are you going to be the person that's walking because you blew your load, or are you going to be the person that's running? That's also the hard part, is that you have to be so patient. You have to run and do your own race. You can't get caught up in the moment. You can't make those poor decisions. You can't do that. You have to be smart. You have to play the game. Not the game is in, like with other people. But it's like it's playing chess with yourself.
Good morning, my man.
Happy Monday. It's June 8th, 2020. Welcome aboard Crushing Iron Podcast 370.
Yeah,
Is
370.
it 370? Okay, that's what I thought. Your delay there had me thinking I was off kilter. But yeah, 370. We appreciate you tuning in. I am Robbie. That is Mike. We come to you twice a week for the most part, Mondays and Thursdays, but always twice a week. We cover triathlon, we cover life, we cover everything in between. So we appreciate you tuning in and giving us your time. We have a 369 previous podcasts. You can always dive back in and check those out if you're tuning in at 370. I know a lot of listeners like to kind of pick and choose the topics that might feel more top of mind for them, but Mike does an outstanding job of outlining those and giving descriptions, so they're easy to kind of sift through if you're searching for one that might be right on cue for what you feel like you need at the moment. In some of those podcasts, we'll have race previews, race recaps. We'll have on the occasional race director, sometimes a guest, but for the most part, we just sit back, turn on our mics, hit record, and have an open, honest discussion with no ads, no sponsors, no agenda, just he and I chatting as friends and both coaches and athletes, going through what we're both going through ourselves and what our athletes are going through. We'll occasionally dive into our Facebook group, which is Crushing Iron Group. You can find that on Facebook, answer a simple question, and we'll let you in. A lot of great athletes and a lot of great resources in there. We'll oftentimes take the pulse of that community and use that as kind of the outline for the podcast. But for the most part, we just talk about our experiences. And if we can, we will hopefully deliver that in a way that you can digest it and apply it to your daily life in a positive way, whether it's in training, whether it's in life, or sometime, well, hopefully it's in both. And if we can do that today, we will consider it a total success.
Yeah, I think that's our
Set the bar
agenda,
low.
right?
Well, yeah, I guess to be
We
fair,
have
we
an
do have an
agenda. We
agenda.
try
Yeah,
to make you
let's be
better
honest.
athletes.
Yeah, everybody has an agenda. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like, as I've tried to like wean myself off Facebook here and there because of everyone's like whatever. Everyone's like, oh, they just got an agenda. Let's be honest. Everyone has an agenda. Okay,
She's got an
everyone.
agenda.
It could be a good one. It could be a bad one. Uh, Everyone has an agenda. It's just, is it positive? Is it negative? Is it for the good? Is it for bad? Or, and I think most importantly, is it something that's kind of malleable, something that flows and that's flexible over time, that they can change, and at least you're open to other thoughts and other opinions, and doing it in a positive way and delivering it that way. So, I think that's yeah. So that is our agenda. Happy and healthy is also our agenda. That's the way we train. That's the way we try to live, and that's what we hope our podcast expresses itself to you as you listen and take things away, whether it's life advice, training advice, digging deep into the data, or race previews. Now that we have races coming up, which is super exciting. It's all good. It's a good thing. So yeah, that is our agenda. So I will have to scrap that and edit that from future intros, and say that you sponsor and ad free, but with an absolute agenda, and see how that goes over. That's be a
Clear
hard
and
delivery.
focused agenda.
Focused agenda.
Did I hear you say you're trying to wean off Facebook, but like yesterday, it's kind of hard to do, right?
Yeah, I know. That was like I mean, listen, I'm sure there is an app for this, or a filter, or a setting, but I don't have Facebook. I don't have the app, so I took that off my phone. I haven't been on Twitter since this whole COVID thing started. I got up Instagram months and months, and I mean probably a year ago, I think. So I don't really have, and I'm not on any of the other apps that exist in terms of like social connecting. So when I do log on, I hop on I hop on either I'll look at it on my phone, which is very inconvenient the way that they format it, and they do it on purpose. They want to drive you to the app. Or I'll just hop on my desktop. I'll have a screen open or something while I'm working and pop in. But I, I try to weigh the negatives and the positives, and I will, to be honest, I have blocked many people the last like 2 or 3 months. Not really blocked, but just kind of unfriended or stopped seeing their posts because like we do a lot of these things to ourselves. Like we expose ourselves to things that we really like. We get frustrated about. They're like, wait a minute, I have a 100% total choice to open up Facebook and to scroll through mindlessly and consume all these things that might make us really ticked off or disappointed or frustrated or anxious or sad or mad, whatever it is. We do that to ourselves. But then we have days like yesterday when I'm like, I can't imagine not having it. So like
Right.
if I could find like a way to um, have it to where I was only allowed to pop in and check out, the active athlete group or the crushing iron group, then I think I'd be pretty on. But yeah, I mean, there's some positives to it. I think a
We're
lot of
working
it's,
on that.
yeah, we're working on it. But yeah, a day like yesterday, yeah, I can't imagine not having it.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling kind of, I'm on like one of those emotional roller coasters today. So yesterday was one of those pretty awesome days as a team and as a coach. But yeah, just an all around good day. But I am glad I had it yesterday. It made the day that much more special.
Well, I talk about my news career a lot, and that reminded me of one of my things, or one of the things my boss was trying to, as marketing director, get me to do was create this sense of FOMO. It was like our agenda, right? Like, how can we make it seem like people are missing out if they're not watching us?
Hmm.
And that's really the thread that sort of runs through it, especially for me, for you probably too, on some degree. It's just sort of this thing that kicks in. It's like, man, I have to go look and see what I'm missing.
Hmm.
And it is crazy because I've been off my phone too on that lately, but you go on there now, you got like 60, 70 notices, and you're like, man, is this important? I don't know, man. It's always like, is there one thing you're missing? I mean, where does it end? But I think it is, there's something to be said for the energy that I think you harness by not spending a lot of time on there too. So it's, if something's important, it usually finds you,
Yep,
right?
totally agree.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we were
and I
talking
think
about that on the boat the other day. Like somebody forgot their phone and like, I don't know. And then I think one of the guys was, his brother was due for a kidney transplant. And that was the day he forgot his phone, is when he got his
no.
notice.
So yeah, I
So,
think that's one of those things you might want to have.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I think what's important to us. I think is always like relative and a fluid because something that might feel important one day, the next day feels totally insignificant. And then what we deem as something we have to know or have to be like immersed in usually is something that we'd probably be better off not even absorbing. But
Mm,
we just, like you said, you feel like you have to be involved, you have to know things, and that's, I mean, I think it's nice to have a pulse on what's going on in the world. It makes you aware, it makes you think, which I think is a good thing. But I think we also kind of, human nature is not, I don't think, shaped in a way that when you do consume it, your first thought is, oh, you know what? Although I disagree or don't like this, maybe I should think through it. It's immediately like we are going to take an offensive or a defensive stance. It's never maybe I should take a neutral stance and challenge myself in my own beliefs instead of like throwing vitriol and hate towards somebody or saying you're stupid or this is one way. Everyone loves to pick sides for some reason. It's like, we're on this team and you're like, wait a minute, there is no real team. You have your own agenda, you have your own beliefs, and we do whatever we possibly can to constantly and consistently confirm those beliefs and reaffirm them to ourselves that we are right and everyone is wrong. We know what we're talking about and you don't. And that's the way I think, most humans operate, that's why, I think a lot of ways Facebook can do negative things. But as you and I both saw yesterday in our closed active athlete group, I believe that is how Facebook should be. In terms of like, if you're going to take time to scroll through Facebook and be up to date with people that you care about and that you truly are friends with and you have an invested interest in, then it should be positive. It should be filled with support. It should be filled with, a community feel. And so yesterday, we had a team 10K. Some people call it a virtual 10K. Listen, if we look up the definition of virtual, that's not it. It's like, Swift and Train Road, those are virtual things. You going out and racing out in the real world is not a virtual event. It's you actually doing something out in the real world and racing in actual environment conditions. So I put this on the calendar, I don't know how long ago, like I think maybe 2 months. two
Yeah, it's
months
been
ago.
sitting there.
It's been for a while, and I uploaded the event to everyone's Training Peaks and just kind of had it sitting out there. I wanted to pick an event, yeah, a race distance that I knew we could do. I didn't want to add in, I didn't want to make it like an actual, virtual event, which they do like the VR series at Ironman, other racing events have, or you have to be on a bike or you have to do it inside, and sometimes it's spur of the moment. They're not really planned far out, but I wanted to kind of have something out there just to kind of give some people, because at this point, I think it was like February or early March, I put it out there that at this point, we really didn't know what was going to happen, how long people were going to be out of racing, when things were going to start to pop up. And so I figured, hey, put something out there, a little something for people to kind of keep their eye on, keep them motivated if they need it, but just know that like you're working towards something. I mean, you're always working, you're always in a process, but you're working towards something. And so we dropped it out there, and as I kind of filled them in this morning on my kind of weekly check-in email, was I picked it for two reasons. One, I thought the time of year was great, and I thought the distance was really hard. I picked June, which I'm sure a lot of them were probably not happy with, because I could have done it in like, March on a short notice, been like, oh, the weather's perfect, let's go out and race a 10K. But I wanted
Hmm.
it to be a tough time of year. And June is tough because you're not really acclimated to the weather. It's just now getting hot. It's just now getting really humid. The dew points are soaring, and it's making for oppressive and really uncomfortable conditions. But I wanted that challenge. I wanted it for a few reasons. One, I thought it might lower expectations and make you race smarter, but the 10K distance itself is very hard. In my opinion, it's very hard because it's half the length of a half marathon. So you don't have it, because a half marathon you can totally treat as a reserved longer distance event. And 10K is a long event for a lot of people, but you can't treat it like one, because you want to go fast.
Right.
And the same with like a 5K, like it's twice as long as a 5K. So in my opinion, the reason people love 5Ks is because you can go balls to the wall, all out, explode, and by mile two you're done, but you only have a mile left, and you can basically just limp your way home at still a good pace and finish. A 10K at mile three or four, if you implode, 2 miles, over 2 miles is a long way to make it back when you know you're going to be suffering, and then you add the conditions in. And so I think the 10K distance is great because it shows speed and strength. I mean, that's the half marathon too for a lot of athletes, but for everyone, that's why I picked it. And so everybody, I did mine on Saturday, because it worked out better for Allie and my schedule. Allie did hers Sunday, and then to be totally honest, it was either run by myself, or run with the other four guys we have here in Chattanooga, and I absolutely watched them obliterate me. And so there's
Yeah.
a lot of wins there. And I mean, just like the stuff they put out yesterday was just kind of unfair and ridiculous. But having said that, so everybody woke up yesterday, and that's what our Facebook feed was filled with. It was. I will say this, and I don't think I'm being a prisoner of the moment, because we've been away from racing so long. I have a ton of highlights in my coaching career that aren't surrounded by PRs or podiums or Kona World Championship slot, qualifications. Like those aren't even in like my top five lists. But I have these experiences and these races and these events that stand out in my mind. I just like where I really felt a whole bunch of gratitude and appreciation for what I do, and then also for the team that we have and the people that we surround ourselves with. And yesterday was that day. It's got to be up there in the top three, if not one of the best days I feel like I've ever had as a coach. And it wasn't just because people were putting down numbers and paces that were just incredible all across the board. But it was just to watch everybody be so supportive of each other, and no matter if they were, I mean, we ran the gamut. And to say that our team is deep and we work with truly everyone and every ability, we had an athlete average in the fives. He averaged like 5:47s for a 10K, and we had athletes hit every number: 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, even 15-minute miles for their 10K. We hit it all. And the to watch them support each other and encourage each other, whether it was a great day, whether it was a rough day, or whether they felt compelled and moved to just get out the door and do the 10K because their team was doing it, and that spark that could have lit underneath them because they have this community, they have these people pushing them, not to just, PR, ER, or to crush it all day, but just to work hard and to do something good and push themselves. And that's what the day was about. And it was a very, very special day for me as a coach. Again, outside of the results, which were spectacular, and to be honest, a little bit surprising. In some ways, it was just great. I feel very fortunate to be able to do what we do.
Mm. And last night we texted a little bit, and I've been off the grid this weekend. I'm up in Wisconsin, where I was on a lake most of the weekend, and I came back to my mom's last night, and you're like, you got to go see the athlete page, and I was like, yeah, I'll go check it out. And then it was, a lot of excitement around that. But before that, I had checked one of my athletes and to see how they. And the first thing I read from him was like, I'm really disappointed in myself. So that was what was in my head before you said go check out the athlete page. And then I went on there. So I'm like, oh no, the first guy is like he had a bad day. And then but I went on there, and that was the cool thing about it, right? Was that a lot of people had great days, and then there was several in there that just stepped up and said, "Hey, I want to do over. I blew it, or I kind, I didn't do well, but I learned." And that was the thing, right? It was so refreshing to see people. Some people did great, and other people were, struggled, but they were not mad. They were just sharing it and saying, "Hey, I just I didn't have it or whatever, but I learned a lot, and I'll do it better next time." And it's kind of like that's important, man, because people do struggle. I mean, it's everyone has bad days, and a lot of times it happens on the day when you're kind of
Hmm.
trying to test it out or you're racing or whatever. And it's important to remember that you're not alone. And I think that when others step up and say, "Hey, I struggled too," that's a good feeling. So it's like, what do we learn? And that was the overall theme, was that people would say, "Yeah, I went out too hard, and that was my bad, and this or that or whatever it was." And that was one of the coolest things I learned. And I think when I read your email this morning too, and it was one of the more interesting things I read or thought about, that was that you start to question yourself, because we've had no racing, we've had no real tests, and like anything on paper that's going to stick around or be on the internet for forever. And you just kind of go through what you're doing and hope it's the right stuff, right? Because we've all been training in quarantine for 3-4 months now, and there's really been no official test of that or whatever. And it is easy to start losing confidence in yourself or question your decision making or what you're doing, and how do you keep that momentum going. So I thought that was a really good point, and I think it's worth discussing.
I think it's healthy to question ourselves. I think when you see people or hear people that are confident in what they do, or they, obviously there's a huge difference between being cocky and confident, or sure of yourself. But what I wrote in there was that over the last 3 or 4 months, like I haven't lost confidence as a coach, but you start to question things, and especially being as removed from it as I have been in the last 2.5, 3 years. Is I went from being able to check things and do things like 45, 50 hours a week. That's my job. It's my full-time job. Is this? It's coaching. It's looking through the numbers, talking with athletes, like, and then this all happened, and then we've got, Hayden didn't go to daycare, so now he was home all of those hours, and juggling that with Allie's work, and there were weeks where I felt like I was just terrible at what I was doing. I mean, I didn't truly see that I was terrible. I think you get those thoughts like you're so used to doing something one way that you feel like if you can't do it that exact way, then you're not doing anything as good. And so, which I don't think is right or wrong. I think it's human nature, that you've become comfortable with this assurance that you are able to do this one way, and then when you have these opportunities removed, and then time, it's like, well, you can't do as good of a job. And then you take away the fact that you have so many restrictions that are in place, because let's be honest, like I use this analogy, and I think on a previous podcast too, in our emails, like when you take away swimming from a coach, from a triathlon coach, it's like taking salt away from a chef. Like you just always use it. You always have a swim in there. Like there, it's swimming. You have swim, bike, run. You map things out. You use swimming as a, to get faster, but also for recovery. And you have days you want them to be. And now you totally remove that. It's been an experience I've never had ever in my coaching career, and I honestly never want to have it again. So you remove time, and then you take away a sport to now you're still training triathletes, and you're also training runners, and then you have restrictions that they can't do. They can't be outside. They only have time to do it here. And now their kids at home, and you're juggling all these extra stressors that, I made some choices as a coach to go really, really hard after running more and more cycling. This is I saw a lot of coaches posting, strength cord workouts and, buy a Vasa trainer or buy this. And it was like, let me swim tethered. And while I think those are perfectly fine if you want to do those, I didn't see the I don't say I didn't see the point. I just chose to, if we're going to have an extra hour and a half, 2 hours a week, then we're going to spend it running or cycling. Because I think like once the time we get back in the water, you're going to have time to pick it up. And those extra hours we spent, those extra 5, 6, 7, 8 hours we spent running or riding every month, they're going to pay huge dividends when it comes back around. And then you just go weeks and months without seeing people perform. And athletes need it too. It's like coaches and athletes are the same in a lot of ways, like because coaches are athletes for the most part, but you're in this process, and it does. I mean, I wrote this morning. It takes a lot of patience to work with me. I'm sure in a lot of ways, kind of like being married to me, like my wife. It takes, there's a huge upside, but it takes a lot of patience. I think that's probably true with the athletes, is that we don't do a lot of flashy work. We don't do a lot of, track Tuesdays and time trials where you can see like little blips of what you have and that are these, extravagant numbers. And, you plug away and you work hard and you're consistent, and we stay healthy, and we just kind of trend up. And, it's not flashy. It's not like day trading. It's like putting money away in a place where you can get a good solid safe return after 10, 15 years. But the returns are great, and you don't have the losses. And that's how we operate. And so and athletes get like, oh, I just, tell me where I am, like how much have I improved? I'm like, well, I think you've improved this way, but to be honest, you can never predict, ever. That's why like TriCalc is worthless, and a lot of these other platforms that have, like, in my opinion, like artificial intelligence, or that predictive software that tells you what you should race, I think they're actually terrible in terms of like what they do psychologically for athletes. Is that you have no idea how an athlete is going to show up on race day, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. We had athletes yesterday who went out and on both ends of the spectrum, who felt great and had unbelievable results. And then you had athletes who woke up feeling okay and had okay to good results. And then I had a couple of athletes who absolutely had terrible days, and they ended up cutting it short because they just didn't have it that day. And like that, hey, that's also why we do these, because they're great experiences and we learn from them. And then we can ask ourselves, all right, why did I stop short? Why did I blow up? Why were I feeling these thoughts and having these thoughts in my head? Like that's what you need to take and apply to your racing. And so when you do, to not have those opportunities, you kind of think, all right, I think we're trending up. I think we're in the right spot, but you don't really know until you know. And so you kind of question, like, am I still doing the right things? And am I still, we head in the right direction? Because, you know, as hard as it is for athletes to know what's right in terms of training and philosophy and what's a good approach and what's a bad approach, coaching is also somewhat the same, because you have so many coaches out there. There's hundreds of thousands of coaches, or not more than that, tens of thousands. And you have, very, very intelligent, like out of this world coaches that, post scientific papers and what's working for their athletes and what they prescribe to. And you see all these like moving parts, and you think, all right, well, I don't agree with that, but I do agree with that. Or maybe I should, or am I doing it wrong? Or you're doing this and I'm not, maybe I'm missing the boat. And you have these temptations to change. You have these temptations to question yourself, but it doesn't mean you should stray from what you know. I think it's great to be open-minded, but you need races too, because you need to see that, hey, this has worked. We know it can work. Let's keep pushing forward. Or maybe this didn't work as well as we thought it would. We could change things. But I think questioning yourself is healthy. I think, I do it all the time. I don't think it's a negative. I have confidence. I think I'm a pretty good coach, but I feel like I have a ton of room for improvement. But you need races. You need racing to put it where it matters, because that's why we train. We obviously train to get better. We train to improve our fitness. We want to, achieve these goals. But that's why race day is so special. It's because you get a shot and you have no idea how things are going to go. You could feel great, you could feel terrible, and that was one of the other reasons why I did this the way that I did, is because I think over like 70% of the athletes that we had, like they had like little to no taper. Like it wasn't like I sent everybody in a 10K taper week. Like some people have Buffalo Springs, or Lubbock 70.3 coming up. Some have Muncie. Like they were doing 3.5 hour rides the day before. Like they weren't going to be tapered, but it was an opportunity to race, because I think racing is a mindset. You have it on a specific day, the event is held, you all get to race at the same time in the same atmosphere, but racing is a mindset. It's a more important event, and you have to be mentally, emotionally prepared just as much as you have to do physically. And when you don't have those opportunities, I don't necessarily think it's the physical rust that you have to dust off. When you just dusting the rust off this race, I think it's the mental and emotional rust of believing in yourself and instilling that kind of confidence, and then pushing through the times where your body says or your mind says I want to quit. Because I think for most athletes, that's the first thing that speaks, is your mind is like, I don't want to run hard, or I
Mm.
don't want to bike harder, and you have to say, and you have to kind of question, well, yes, you do. We have to do this, and that takes experience, and you can't have those experiences without racing, and you need to do that not frequently, but you don't want it to be infrequent either.
Yeah. We've talked about taper a lot over the years, and we've always kind of dabbled in this idea of like, man, sometimes taper feels too long or whatever. And in this kind of case, when it's a 10K race, and if you're tapered for that, I mean, I think especially if you're not on top of your mind game for racing, you can
Hmm.
have a tendency to be a little bit over energized, and I think that's where the problem would be, right? So it's like, especially when we're doing, a lot of us on that listen to this podcast, a lot of us that we work with, we're looking at longer races, whether 70.3 or fulls, mentally, to think about that, and the idea of going out too fast, feeling too fresh, and being able to rein that in gets even harder. I think there's a, I mean, we're so used to putting these big miles on. I mean, if you're in a longer race, it's really so much about pacing and chilling more than it is about, trying to go fast. So there's something to be said for this idea that, especially if taper or no, going into yesterday's 10K, if you're thinking in terms of I'm going to go blister this whole thing, that could be a problem right from the get-go,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you want to hold out a little bit, and you want to pace that thing. Like I didn't do it, but of course I haven't been running at all. But so I actually it kind of inspired me to get going again. I mean, I'm kind of dealing with this plantar fasciitis, and I'm kind of maybe babying it a little bit. I can't decide if I'm babying it or if I want to push through it. But anyway, that's the point being is that I think that there's something to be said for maybe being on the tired legs and using it as an actual replication of a race in a way, maybe like looking at it at the last, 6 miles of your half, or at least maybe the last, I mean, it's kind of hard to really control your last 6 miles of a full for most people, but at least look at it as not the first part of the race, but the second part, and then like you're saying, I would like to actually talk about what your instructions were, or at least thought process for everybody to when they were going into this yesterday. I know you had kind of a game plan for at least how to mentally think about how they were going to run this.
Well, I mean, I think the one of the more difficult parts about racing at any point right now is that the obviously it's very dependent on where you live, but like the humidity and the dew point and the temps are so, like, they are the opposite of ideal, right? Like they're not just not PR conditions, they are worst day ever conditions, if for a lot of people. And so you really had to think, and you also had to just totally throw away a lot of expectations, and treat it as a very strategic and tactical event, because you wanted to at least be able to find that edge. And but what I told a lot of people was, like, or everyone, like, these are great experiences because you can have these opportunities. And a lot of people like to go into races, and I think they overthink and they overcalculate, what their watch and their Garmin says they can't do this, they should do this. And they just become incapable of thinking and racing for themselves. They stick to a number for good or for bad, a lot of times for bad. And what I wanted to kind of get across is, like, I want you to go out and try to fail. I say that rarely, but sometimes in workouts for specific people who I think may be kind of rating themselves in too much and afraid to kind of go that next level. And it's not about pushing you over the edge physically. It's about finding out where you can be mentally and emotionally on race day, because you have these conversations in your head. Well, I can just quit and rein it in. It's not my day. But in a race, you don't want to do that. You want to see what you have. But it's about getting to that point and knowing your body. And this is true for everyone, no matter what distances is, sprint up to full, 5K or 1 mile up to marathon. Like, the way that I always describe racing, and especially for longer distances, that for especially for a full marathon, or the 26.2 run after, at the end of an Ironman, is that if you can, it's about starting at an effort level. And whatever pace that gives, like I usually say, start out, the first, 6 to 7, 8 miles of a marathon, or the end of an Ironman, at a 5 or 6 effort scale. And then whatever that pace is that pace. The name of the game isn't necessarily, you know, um, you know, doing any kind of a negative split, because that's not really going to happen. But the name of the game is raising your effort to maintain that pace. And what most people do is they make a huge mistake when they race, is that they go out of the gate at their max effort, and they give themselves no wiggle room physically or mentally and emotionally. Because one of the biggest aspects of getting to know yourself, and that's why I think long duration intervals with no rest are such a benefit, is that you get to work through kind of your own mental and emotional wiring. Like, how good am I at telling myself I can keep going? When do I give up? And if I give up, why do I give up? And when is that kind of buffer, that kind of like red alert siren go off? It's like, all right, your body is there, you feel like at your max, but it's going to take me a solid amount of time, or it's going to take me, a lot out of me mentally and emotionally, to continue to tell myself that I'm okay, to continually tell myself that I'm not in harm, I'm not in danger. This is just uncomfortable. This isn't dangerous. This just doesn't feel good. I'm not in pain. I'm not going to hurt myself. This just, like I said, doesn't feel very good. But what you have to know and understand is, how you're or what you're capable of having that, or to rephrase, how long you feel like you're mentally and emotionally able to have that mentality. Because there's only, let's be honest, there's only so long you can have that. Because at some point because being tired and being in pain and being uncomfortable and not being able to breathe well, that adds up. It's like taking body shots and jabs, like, they add up. It might not be the one punch uppercut that knocks you out, but at some point you're going to fall and give in. And so I think that knowing both of those, all right, this is what threshold feels like. But I think one of the most important aspects an athlete can learn is, how do I match my physical threshold feel to my mental and emotional ability to know that that's okay? And if you can find that match and marry it, then you can hold a really, really, really uncomfortable, solid, strong, fast pace for a long period of time.
Hmm.
And so what happens is, if you don't know what that looks like, and you go past that physical threshold and you go way too early, then you've kind of set off the siren kind of red alert. And to be fair, like, your body will tell you and it'll signal to you, you've made a mistake. You compromised our bodies, so we're going to shut you down. We're going to make you walk, because no matter what you say, it's going to walk itself out, because it's self-preservation. Like, it'll take care of yourself. Or you're going to get to a point to where at mile 3 you think, oh, this is it maxed out, but oh my God, I've got to go 3 more miles. I can't do this. Whereas your body might say, oh, yes, we can. We can definitely do it. But your mind is continuously saying, I don't know that I can hold on being this comfortable for this long period of time. And that is a skill you must learn. raising effort, raising intensity for long periods of time when you're tired at the back end of sessions, not when you're always fresh, not when it's always perfect, but when it's a regular day. And I think it's a skill that has to be learned, and you can do that in training. And I think intervals are great, but getting rest after 5 minutes, yeah, good for you. And you rest for four. Like you just but doing long sustained intervals, like some of the most uncomfortable intervals we'll do on the bike are like 8, 12, 15 minute really hard intervals on 2 minutes rest. And then you do it again. So it's like it's a break, but it's not a huge break. And then, running, you'll do like, sometimes 30 to upwards of 35-minute tempo, which is long and uncomfortable, but you have to find that spot of this is this is not this is not comfortable, but it's also okay. And that's what a 10K is. It's for me at least when I did it on Saturday, it was the first mile in almost every race, you can usually get a freebie. Right? You can go out probably a little bit too fast, and it takes heart rate drift a while to get up. But when the conditions are oppressive like they are with high dew point and high humidity, and it's compromising your ability to perform the way your fitness could really show in cooler conditions, then that can catch up to you quick because it's harder for your body to respond just systematically. And then, for me, it's I just described it a little bit ago. It's like your first 2 miles are feeling yourself out and being steady. The next 2 miles are building to what you think your threshold feeling should be. So you're still concentrating, you're still being tactical, you're still kind of doing like a systems check every quarter mile of how am I feeling? Is this okay to feel like when? Where am I on the course? What do I know is coming next? Do I feel like what do I have left in me? So I need to rein things back and save it because I'm already at a tipping point. Or do I feel like I have more left? Let's push it a little bit more. You get to mile 4, and then basically you need to kind of find that this is me. This is what I have for today. I don't have much more left, but I can hold it till it's done. I can hold it for these next 2.2 miles. And whether that takes you 12 minutes or whether that takes you 20 minutes, you have to understand also what the duration is because your body doesn't care about miles. It cares about your mind, and your body cares about how long, how much longer, how much time it's going to take you, right, to
Yeah.
sustain that effort.
Man, that's exactly what I was trying to say right before you said all that. It was more, well, it was that, yeah, it was more, I was really thinking about it in terms of effort and how, like, I really do, when I'm getting, especially deep in Ironman training, usually I will, a little bit longer runs, that type of thing. I'm always looking for that feeling at the end of a run because I want to crystallize it. And like you said, you have to learn that skill. And I feel like that's the best way for me to learn it is to find that pain threshold at the end of runs and just it's like you've got it's almost over kind of thing. It's almost like practicing the last 2 miles of an Ironman or something over and over and over. It's that feeling I want to be familiar with because I think if you can master that feeling, the feelings leading up to it become a lot more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in running. I mean, running to me is obviously I think the hardest one to master that. And maybe it's just because I grew up mountain biking, and I think that really tests that limit and pushes that variable all the time because there really isn't time off in mountain biking, and you might spend 3 miles climbing up a steep gravelly hill, and the next thing you know, you're flying down the other side, and there's just no real time to relax out there. So I'm real comfortable, I guess, with that long-term grind and cycling that you have to master too. It's the same type of thing, and obviously swimming has the same um, variable involved. But with running, it is it's you got to be like you're saying, fearless but smart.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go too hard because if you're not as tired as you're going to be at the end of a half or a full Ironman, you can't use that extra reserve to maybe push it over the limit and hurt yourself, I guess is what I'm getting at. So there's this weird fine line. And that's another reason why I think I always try to find hills when I'm running,
Mm-hmm.
is it just sort of controls you in a way, but it also puts you in a spot that you need to get used to. It's just like I love how you say just grind it out, and you got to be able to understand that feeling of the grind and be okay with it.
Talking about the hills, like that is one of the terrain is one of the most underrated aspects that athletes take into racing and training. Is in general, it's just called paying attention. I think like conditions and terrain are so underrated in that we somewhat pay attention to them, but the only time we highlight them is when they don't work to our advantage. But what you should know and you should understand is that's also what should help dictate how you're governing your effort. So when for example, like if you're heading out on a bike ride and you know that the first part of the ride is super super easy, it's all flat, it's relatively downhill, you're going 30 miles. Like we know this, and we love this. That's why we love kind of training on the trace. Is that the first couple miles are they're not easy. The first 15 to 20 they're fairly challenging, but they're a good warm up. But then you go out for a long distance. But every minute that you're thinking before you hit the turnaround trip is, I better save what I've got because those last 15 miles will eat your lunch,
Mm.
because they are just brutal. It's some of the hardest. It's the hardest climbs are going to be the last, and so that should, if you're playing it smart, that should help dictate, right, your pacing and your effort. So instead of understanding, oh, well, I know I'm feeling good that I've got to stick to these watts, or I've got to stick to this heart rate or this run pace, you will dig yourself in a hole, because it's about also keeping in reserve what you're going to need to continue to be as successful at the end of the race as you are in the beginning of the race. The same could be said for, like, there's a longer run. I did this run, I think 3 weeks ago. It was 15 miles. I left from my house, and the first little bit's uphill, but then I hit the greenway, and the next little part is it's fairly easy. But the trick here is that I wanted to do a negative split. I wanted to raise the effort the last 5 or 6 miles, which were also going to be the hardest 5 or 6 miles. But so my whole game plan for the first 10 miles was, all right, you can't just think about the miles that you're in. You must always think, engage, and adjust to the miles that you need to do. And not just the miles that you need to do, but how do you want to do them? So knowing your terrain, and that's why loops and out and backs are great, because you can practice and these things. So I knew, like, I went out so much slower, because what I also wanted to do was not just raise my effort, but I still wanted to be faster. And I was able to do that because I played it so safe. I also knew what the terrain was going to be like. I also knew it was going to be hotter. So I needed to kind of gauge myself and play it smart. And I think athletes totally disregard this in their training and then in their racing, as they don't know the course, they don't know what the demands are, they don't know what's going to ask of them. They just think that steady is always the answer, when it's always the sum of your average effort, performance, fitness, pace, whatever. It's not, you can't just look at it in a vacuum. As this has to be here, it's always best to look at it. How are things going to be affected? How are they being affected right now? And how are you setting yourself up for the entire rest of the day in the last, 3, 4, 6 miles of the run if you're doing a triathlon?
Mm. Yeah, man, that's it's not one of those things where you say, I'll worry about it later when I hit that hill later. I'll worry about
Yeah,
my
exactly.
That's kind of how it works, right? Especially you mentioned the trace, and every time we go out there to ride, those first few miles aren't flat by any means, and
No.
every time we take off, everyone's in town and they're excited about riding the trace, and they all just blast out of there, and I'm always like the last guy in line, because I know that it takes me a while to warm up too. That's the other part of that equation. But yeah, it's almost like when you go into Ironman chat or something like that. That your first, vision out of that transition is that big long hill, and everybody's pumped up to run, and it's like, man, you might want to think about that one a little bit,
Hmm.
because it really, how you talk about the reserves is so critical to me. Or it's like when you talk about racing and there's maybe one little hill that's just super steep, and you're like, it's early in the race, I'll just get it out of the way and blast up it. But if you're not ready and that pushes you way out of your zone, that stuff comes back to bite you, right? It's like
Hmm.
you don't think about how, taking yourself way over your limit just for a short period of time, what that really does to you. I mean, I don't know about the science behind it, but I'm sure that there's some truth to it. That you do. I mean, it's easy to kind of, especially at the first mile of at Chattanooga, running up that hill. Let's just get that out of the way. But like, if you just took that maybe like 10%, 20% easier, how that might pay off at mile 20. You just there's something there, right? Or am I just
Right, but no, but I mean, but to use the the boxing analogy again is like you have the option to know your own effort and to know your own ability in the course to say, I'm going to choose to accept these as body blows instead of forcing them into being uppercuts, right? Or
Mhm.
jabs. Like you have that decision, and it's always based on executing an effort, right? It's not about, oh, I've got to run at this pace today and then watch yourself blow up and implode, right? And some people did that yesterday. Some people, well, people do it every day, no matter what it is. Training, racing, people do it all the time. They over they overestimate either what they're capable of on the day, or they underestimate what the conditions are going to do to their thought process and what they think they're capable of. It's not that they're not capable of it. It's that especially triathletes, like they love to know, going back to TriCalc, they love to know what they can do at every moment of every day. But what they fail to take into consideration is like the time. Like I had an athlete early this morning. So he was like, so based on what you've seen and what you've heard in my past, like, do you think I'm capable of going sub 12 hours at Ironman Chattanooga? And I was like, listen, dude, like I am the non-expectation coach. You're not going to get an answer out of me. Sorry, that's not what I do. But we're also so far from race day, we have no idea. Uh, I also know that you could come into, especially a race like Chattanooga, you could come into Chattanooga in the absolute best fitness of your entire life, and it'd be 100, 100, 110 degrees that day, and no matter what happens, no matter what fitness you have, those conditions are going to make that not your greatest day more than likely. So you can't make those predictions. You can't also hop out and say, "Oh, I've always done these, this run pace in training, or these watts and these miles per hour in training, so I've got to stick with this on race day." And your body might be the whole time being like, "I have no idea what this guy's doing. We're not even friends. He's not even listening to me right now. He's gonna drive us into the ground." So you have these choices in training and in just setting up your weekly, like to go to like a different level, is like when you look at your training week, it's like, all right, am I better off just taking this day easy? I mean, I commended multiple athletes yesterday from pulling the plug or not even doing their 10 day because they were playing it safe on a niggle or an injury, and I said, good for you, like way to be smart, like run this for the long haul. And so you need to think about that too in terms of how you look at training, is all right, do I want to make today, take today as a body shot and be able to wake up and, tomorrow, or what, let's just let it be a jab or an uppercut and then see if I can even get back up off the canvas tomorrow. No, you have to be smart because you want to be able to withstand those and recover and stay up and do it around and make it round after round after round after round. So, you can blame the conditions, you can blame the temps, you can blame the hills, you can blame whatever. Athletes love to do that. But the fact of the matter is that you can still perfectly execute and express your fitness each and every time you're out there. It just might look differently because of the terrain and the conditions, but it can look as great as you want it to, or it can look as absolutely terrible as you want it to do as well. And that's why racing without a watch and knowing your body, and that's why, biking with, a sense of what's good and what's bad, or what's, red alert status is always good. But you know your body better than anything, better than your Garmin device, even better than your coach. You know yourself and what you're feeling better than anybody. It takes a lot of acceptance and it takes a lot of experience to understand those warning signs, to understand when it's okay to push more or when to reel back, and getting out of your own head and understanding more about what your body is doing and what it can do.
You're the patience coach, and that's really commendable. I, but I just love it when you say, when you tell people, I have no idea if you can do that on race day or whatever. But have you ever found that some people react better to that? It's like, yeah, you can. Like some people will come in and say, hey, I've done this in the past, done this. Do you think I can do this? And I'm kind of the guy that would be like, yeah, you can do it. But I think the caveat is, but you got to do all this beforehand and to see if we can even get there. But do I think you can do it? I mean, I guess that's the fine line I'm talking about, is like, I believe people can do whatever they want to do, and I like to encourage that as well. And I think you do. I think it's interesting to look at that, because like me, for example, I mean, Rob, you think I could do sub 11 over there? And if you said, I don't know, man, I'd be like, oh, what do you mean? You don't have confidence? But it's not that. It's just that um, certain people, and I think what you're doing there is kind of like weeding guys like me out a little bit. It's like, that's up to you, bro. You know,
It
I
is. I
can't,
mean, it's like, it's up to
but
you. It's like I know what you've done, right? Like
yeah,
if you ask me like 48 hours before your event and the weather was going to be perfect, I would have an idea,
yeah, a
but I
good
still
idea.
but you can't to ask like 3 months ahead of time, no idea.
It's
Because
that
I only know what
possible
you've
versus
done.
probable thing.
Right. Like I know what you've done the last 3 months. I don't know what the hell you're going to do the next three. And you don't. You just don't. Like listen, if we've learned anything from the last 3 months is that guess what? We have no idea what's going to happen, how life is going to go, how your life is going to be, what you're going to do. So I mean, no, you can't predict those kind of things, and I think you're doing yourself an absolute disservice if you do.
Mm,
I don't see the point. I don't see the point in saying I'm going to do this because you're either, in my opinion, you're either going to overshoot what you're capable of for that day and blow up and underperform. You're going to undershoot and just rein it in and think, oh, I've got this time that I kind of spoke out to myself and let's make it a reality. I could probably go a little faster, but let's kind of play it safe. And I bet you I can do this.
yeah.
And you hang out
It,
that. What are the chances, right? What are the chances that the perfect time that you picked was the perfectly executed, empty the tank, best result and performance your body had in you that day? Like zero, like less than 1%, no matter what.
mhm.
It's
Yeah,
pointless.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like giving somebody a sugar high, really, if you start going down that road,
Hmm.
and
You're
and
chasing things, and it's not. You work hard, you do what you're supposed to do, you take care of yourself, and then you see what happens on race day.
hmm yeah, you just never know.
Yeah, but I think that's the fun part of it, right? Is like you that's why you also have to be flexible, like so flexible in this sport. Is like and I think it's also the fun part, even though triathletes are so type A, they have to know this, they have to know that. I'm like, there is no there is no software out there, there is no coach, there is no scientist that can predict the human body and say, because just think about how complex, right, the human body is anyway. To say that I predict on race day in 90 days you'll be able to do this. Oh, well, just scratch the fact that I don't have control over the other 3,000 athletes. I don't have the control over, your bike and a flat tire. I don't have any control over the swim, being wetsuit legal or not, or the current being stronger or not, or, you swimming in a straight line. I also don't have control over, what you decide to do in the transition. Do you lose your nutrition? Do you have your nutrition? I don't understand how windy the bike is going to be, how hot the bike might be, or everybody else. I'm like, I don't know about the run. Like, okay, take all those into consideration, and then just say to yourself, guess what, man? You don't have any idea. All you can do is show up, do your best, put forth the effort, and try to execute, and just see where everything else falls.
hmm Yeah, it that you talk a lot about being smart on the race course. Those are the things that the hundreds of decisions like that. Like, how are you going to handle the fact that you lost your nutrition? You're going to go, just throw in the towel, or you're going to improvise in a in a way that's going to save the day. And then, are you going to you be pissed when you get on the bike because you lost it, and you're just going to go out and grind? So it's about thousands of decisions that you make during that race, and however that however that plays out is going to be the difference. You know, it
You
is.
can, I mean, every decision you make in a race, I think, you could put under the title of, am I looking to gain seconds and give up minutes? I think, I do. I think you could fit that title above a million different decisions athletes make on race day. Like, I specifically say this in kind of my pre-race email that I just can't wait to start sending out again later this month when we start even racing more. Is if you lose your nutrition, go back and get it. Don't be, oh, well, now I've got to stop. I'm going to lose. I'm going to lose a couple. I'm going to lose 30, 45 seconds. I can do that. I've got to stay arrow. And then you look at somebody in their position, you're like, dude, you're catching more wind than a sail across the Pacific. Like, you're not saving any of my times on being arrow. Don't give up the seconds. Don't think you're saving and gaining seconds to give up minutes down the road. Maybe not the next 10 to 15 miles, but the last 10 miles on the bike, guess what you're going to wish you had had? Your nutrition. Guess what you're really going to wish you had when you started the run? A fully stocked system. So like every decision that you make, every decision. That's another part of the email that I sent. Is like every decision you make today, from the very first stroke you take in the water, is How is this effort in this execution, this speed, whatever you want it, how is this going to positively or negatively affect my ability to run my very, very best the back half of today? Every decision you make should be that question should be filtered through it. Well, I could push it, but is it worth it? I should really like try to catch that group in front of me and smash it. Is that gonna be worth it? Am I gonna be paying for this later? Probably. All right, so are those extra like 17 seconds worth it? You know? No, they're not. Like, but it takes going back to like the saying I'm the patience coach is like because that's what it's all about. Like if you if you've never been to a race or you haven't raced in a long time, go spectate and don't show up until the last half of the race. Don't show up until everyone's on the run course. And then open your eyes and look around at the second loops or the last 6 miles of 70.3 or the last half marathon of an Ironman and tell me what really matters. It's how you finish. It's about what you have in the tank. Are you going to be the person that's walking because you blew your load, or are you going to be the person that's running while making up minutes every mile, right? Do you understand how much time you can make up just averaging 2 minutes more per mile over somebody of an Ironman on the run? Almost an hour, right? That is a significant amount of time. Like these are all things that add up, and that's how you should approach things. But that's also the hard part is that you have to be so patient. You have to run and do your own race. You can't get caught up in the moment. You can't make those poor decisions. You can't do that. You have to be smart. You have to play the game. Not the game is in, like with other people. It's like it's playing chess with yourself. Yeah, so how does this move affect this move affects this move affects this move? It's not so much about a return on investment this move. It's about setting the final move up. And that's how you should approach race day. That's how you should approach training. Because for training, your training blocks, your weeks, your months, those are just small, minor chess moves. You look at a singular chess move and you think, this is really boring. None of this is exciting, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see like the final thing, or you see it like time lapse, fast forward, or you see like the very end, and you're like, boom, done. I got it. Like that's how racing is. That's how training is. You have to be patient. You have to think through things. You can't just and that's why you see for the most part that's why you see so many dudes falling apart is because they race with their ego. They race with like they race with the wrong thinking cap on, and they just blow up and they can't race their own race. They have to get caught up in the moment. Like that's just that's such a you just find yourself getting in a bad spot, and you have to understand that. And that's also like a really important aspect of what you try to instill, or what you should, I think, try to instill in athletes, is that like you have to start trying to be patient. You have to work on that mental and emotional reining yourself in to know that okay, it's okay if I get past. It's okay if I get past. It's okay if I get past. Even if you're not getting past that much, it's still okay. It's okay to still feel good. Like because what I want to do is I want to be running through aid stations when people are walking through with their hands on their hips, because that is what matters. It is all about the run, and you have to know that. But that's also why people will say, "Oh man, I had a great bike split today, man. I just it's just couldn't find myself on the run." And when you have this conversation at mile 14, as they're walking through with 16 Gatorades in their hand, you're like, "Oh well, how is there's no such thing as a good bike split followed by a bad run. It's just called poor pacing."
Yeah, that's great, man. Earlier we mentioned the idea of fearlessness, and I think there's something important about not being afraid to do what you just said,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what happens is you get afraid because you're going to get behind or you're going to lose. You see somebody run by you in mile 2 or bike by you at mile 15, and there's a certain fear that sets in that says, hey, I got to go or I'm going to get torched. So there's something to be said about having the courage to be patient too.
Mm-hmm. It takes a lot because you have to keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and that just
The
that kind
confidence.
of yeah, it makes like the momentum build to even like a bigger moment of do you have it, do you have it, do you have it? But it is definitely worth it to wait. In my opinion, I think it's always worth it to wait.
All right, man. Good job today.
Thank you. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it as well to you.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, we appreciate everyone as always tuning in. If you want more info on all the things that we do, you can head over to our website, C26Triathlon.com. It's got everything you need to know about coaching, camps, and community. It also has our online hub in there that is just continuing to grow as a resource library for all things triathlon, from videos to blogs to athlete interviews to our Zoom meetings. There's a ton of info in there, and you can hop in there and check that out. If you have any questions for Mike, he's at crushingiron@gmail.com. If you have any questions specifically for me, C26coach@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I want everybody to email me whenever you hear Robbie say you might get a flat tire if that makes you anxious.
Yeah, you might want to filter your inbox because there's gonna be a lot of stuff that makes anxious.
I think it does.
Yep.
Um,
It's the
all
truth,
right,
though.
buddy. I really appreciate it, man.
Always, man. Tell your family I said hello.
I will. Maybe next time we can talk a little. Have you watched Lance Armstrong yet?
0.
No. Okay. Well,
No.
one of these days maybe we can gloss it. It's pretty good. Part 2 is pretty excellent, I thought.
Mm.
You know,
Is he still a lying narcissist, or has that changed?
he's he's a little bit. He's still struggling with it, man. He's like he's still
He's incapable of ownership.
he owns a lot, but he's still got that thing. You know, you can see it a little bit. It's pretty great. I mean,
It's like saying I own a car, but I can't own the engine.
he did. You know, he did say that it was the best thing that ever happened to him. So I have to give that.
No, we still can't fully apologize and own it. Okay, good talk.
He apologized.
Maybe I'll listen. We'll see.
I think it might be worth it.
I'll give Lance a chance.
Nobody's perfect.
It's true.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it, man.
Talk to you later.
See you.